The 617th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
Elton ready on his second attempt. That one is no good. They battle for it. Loose ball. Recovered Marvin. He scores. 17 seconds left. And he was fouled. Here we go. Lawson with a runner. No. The rebound. Hansbrough at the gun. Got it.
They were 4 for 24.
Hansbrough on a switch on Paulus. A deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Tipped away by Johnson. It's loose. Page. Johnson.
They're dancing in the aisles. They're high-fiving. They're celebrating. They're going bananas on Franklin Street.
Pass to Britt, 15 seconds to play. Up high to Page, gets a screen from Meeks. Page driving in on the left, high off the glass for two. Louisville with 7 seconds. Jones has it, goes left corner, Black's here for three. Back iron, 1 second to play, stick up, no! Carolina wins it! The Tar Heels win it! 72-71. 6 seconds to go. Pinson comes front court. Pinson to May for the win. Got it! Luke May! He got it! 0.3 of a second! Luke May gives Carolina the 75-73 lead. Are you kidding me?
Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
Hello and welcome into another live edition of the Four Corners podcast. We are powered by Carolina Electrical Services. Josh and Anthony here with you guys on a Tuesday night, about 2.5 hours or so after Carolina beat St. Bonaventure 85-70 in the Fort Myers tip-off event to improve to 6-0 on the 2025-2026 season. And we're here to talk about that. We'll take a look at the box score. I'll deliver a quote from Hubert Davis. We'll give our thoughts and takeaways, hand out our game balls, and so much more from tonight's win. Without any further ado, let's go ahead and get into the recap edition part of the show. As I mentioned, Carolina, they take down the Bonnies 85-70 to improve to 6-0, the first 6-0 start since the 2016-17 season, and that's important because that was the last time Carolina won the national championship. Tonight they were led by Arizona transfer Henri Veesaar, who had a career high in points and rebounds in a 24-point, 13-rebound double-double. He set the tone early and often for Carolina with his ability to alter shots at the rim, grab defensive rebounds, and then in the second half, he put on a dunking exhibition, kind of like we've seen from Caleb Wilson, where it felt like every time he grabbed the ball, he was going up with two hands and flushing it for big dunks for Carolina in the second half. And all in all, 4 of the 5 starters for Carolina, they scored in double figures, led by Veesaar, as I mentioned, his 24 points. Caleb Wilson had a workmanlike 20-point performance. Kyan Evans with the quiet 11-point performance. And then Luka Bogovac, he added 10 for Carolina in a game where the Heels shot 51% from the field, 44% from three, one of their better overall offensive outings over the course of 40 minutes as opposed to shooting well in one half and not shooting so well in the other half. Carolina led 35-33 at halftime, in large part because they had turned the ball over 11 times in the first half. They toned those down to just 2 turnovers in the second half, and they outscore the Bonnies 50-37 to pull away for the comfortable win. But something we learned throughout the course of this game, St. Bonaventure is really, really good. Their three best players, all three, really with Simmons the second and Mitchell, those two guys in particular at different points in time, gave Carolina a little bit of fits. They fought hard, but the longer the game played, the more Carolina wore down St. Bonaventure, and they pulled away for a comfortable victory.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was one of those games where, St. Bonaventure definitely fought. After Carolina came out, really got off to a hot start, sort of flexed a little bit of muscle. You saw St. Bonaventure respond. They did a really good job of getting to the rim with some of their big guys. They were knocking down a couple of shots from the perimeter or just inside of the perimeter. And, credit to them. I think they're a really solid team. That was one of the things when we were originally talking about them, that, when you look at their Ken Pom rankings, when you look at really just some of the teams that they've beaten so far this year, it really didn't impress you, the group that they had beaten. And so you really wondered what type of team was coming in here to play Carolina. Was this a team that was a formidable enough opponent for Carolina to face? And I think you learned, pretty quickly in the middle portion of that first half that this was a formidable team. They created some turnovers off of Carolina, and that really allowed them to get out to a pretty successful start. Daryl Simmons, definitely a guy that I think when you look at him, he's a guy that you have to really give credit to St. Bonaventure for finding a guy that's a little bit smaller but can really make tough shots. Frank Mitchell was a guy that I think really surprised us with some of what he was able to do, playing that really physical game for St. Bonaventure, and it really led to some success for them. But Carolina's just too powerful, man. When you got these guys inside, when you got Henri Veesaar, when you've got Caleb Wilson, it's going to be really difficult for any team to be able to keep up with that. And so the first half wasn't exactly great, but Carolina did exactly what they needed to in that second half to be able to pull away. And that's why we're sitting here talking about a victory in the first game of the Fort Myers Tip-Off Classic.
Yeah, look, St. Bonaventure, I'll be honest, from when you look at the box scores and some of the wins, you look at their Ken Pom ranking, did not expect this version of the Bonnies to be as scrappy. That's a proud program. I think Mark Schmidt's been there, forever. He's taken them to the tournament. I think I saw the stat right from Adam Lucas. They're 12-8 against, Power 5 opponents in their last 20 games, and all of those games have been played on neutral floors. So they weren't afraid. They weren't intimidated by seeing a program like Carolina. And they fought and they competed. But Carolina did the things in the second half that we talked about in the preview, that if they did those things, it would really be it'd be hard for St. Bonaventure to hold up. And that's why Carolina was able to build a lead. I think it got as big, as 19, I think is what it was, in the second half, and they were able to win, as comfortably as they did. And now Carolina sits 6-0, and as of the end of their result, with other results around college basketball having gone final today, a busy day in the sport, Carolina moved up 4 spots in Ken Pom overall. They're now up to 21st in Ken Pom's rating, and their defense is now inside the top 20. And that's something that we'll continue to talk about here in tonight's edition of the show. Let's take a look at the box score. It's a pretty one for Carolina. They shoot 51% from the field. They were 28 of 55. Meanwhile, St. Bonaventure was just 29 of 70. They shot 41%. Both teams very efficient from behind the three-point line. Carolina was 8 of 18 for, I believe, a season best 44%. On the other hand, St. Bonaventure, one less make, one less attempt. They were 7 of 17. That does come out to shooting 41% from behind the three-point line. The Heels were dominant from the foul line. They were 21 of 27, a 78% clip. On the other hand, though, St. Bonaventure just 5 of 8 from the charity stripe. So Carolina 13 more makes than attempts for St. Bonaventure at the foul line. Overall, they took 19 more free throws than the Bonnies. Carolina did turn it over 13 times, but it led to just 10 points for St. Bonaventure. On the other hand, Carolina forced 9 turnovers. That led to 14 UNC points. Rebounding, a big theme for Carolina. They win the battle of the boards 40-31, including 30-20 on the defensive glass. They were out rebounded on the offensive glass 11-10, but St. Bonaventure had 11 offensive rebounds, 11 second chance points. Carolina had 10 offensive rebounds, but they did muster 13 second chance points. Bench points in favor of the Bonnies. Their bench outscored Carolina's 19-11. Points in the paint were even at 36. Fast break points were even at 11. A rare, block night for Carolina. They registered just one block tonight of St. Bonaventure's field goal attempts. On the other hand, St. Bonaventure, 5 blocks of Carolina shots. Carolina with 5 steals. The Bonnies had 8 steals. In totality, Carolina 16 assists on 28 made baskets. Over half their baskets were assisted upon. On the other hand, St. Bonaventure under 50%, just 13 assists on their 29 made baskets. The game was tied 4 times. There were 3 different lead changes. All in all, though, Carolina did lead for 35 minutes and 21 seconds. We'll transition now to the quote of the game from head coach Hubert Davis, where he talked about what he liked from his team in the second half. And Hubert said, quote, "I thought we were much stronger and handled the physicality much better in the second half. The first half, we had 11 turnovers. Second half, we had 2. I think we had 12 points in the paint in the first half, ended up with 36. I felt around the rim, we were dunking everything. We were going strong. If we didn't finish strong or dunk, we got fouled and got to the free throw line. So I felt like we handled the physicality much better in the second half," end quote. And I don't think he's wrong. Carolina just 12 points in the paint in the first half. One of our keys to the game was to establish an inside scoring presence, primarily through Henri Veesaar, Caleb Wilson. They were able to do that primarily in the second half because Carolina just got to the rim. There was just much more relentless pressure on getting to the rim. And St. Bonaventure proved, and this shouldn't come as a surprise, they could not handle Carolina's speed. They could not handle Carolina's physicality. And that's why Carolina doubled their points in the paint over the course of the final 20 minutes. But also, I thought Carolina played soft in the first half. There were too many times where Caleb Wilson just did not seal his defender off. And credit to St. Bonaventure, whether it was Mitchell who got on him or Grahovac, whoever, those guys played through his body. And they were able to get deflections or knock him off his spot. And it's why he wasn't as efficient from the field as he was from the foul line. But, it was a nice, I think, learning experience for Carolina. But it does continue a theme of this team. I don't want to say they're not ready to play. They built a double-digit lead before the under 12-minute timeout. But they do not play their best basketball in the first half. They responded with the big way in the second half, and it started with them being physical, meeting the fight, and getting the ball inside and scoring at will as often as they have at any point in non-conference play outside of the game against Kansas, of course, a few weeks ago.
Yeah, I think it was a concerted effort in the second half to make sure that you got to the rim. And the thing that was frustrating was that if you go back to that first half and you look at what was the most successful Carolina was, it was really when their guards were getting downhill. That was where the success really happened. And so I thought that, in the second half, I wanted to see them put more pressure on the rim. I felt like that was something that they needed to do. And they came out. They were very aggressive in doing that. That's really where you started to see Henri Veesaar really start to take over the game. And that's the thing, man. Take those easy opportunities because you've got the height to be able to do it this year. I mean, you go inside, you get Henri Veesaar in this game, total 24 points, and he made 9 of 14 field goals. I mean, his second half was basically, I mean, a full game's worth of production for him at times. 16 points, 6 of 10 from inside. He had 5 rebounds, 3 of them on the offensive end. But they were doing there was a concerted effort to get him the basketball inside. And then Caleb Wilson, thought the difference with Caleb Wilson was in the second half, he really settled in, learned how to deal with the double teams that were coming to him, and how to finish strong. And so I think that's what you got in this game, was that it took Carolina a little bit of time to adjust to what St. Bonaventure was throwing at them. It was clear that St. Bonaventure wanted to put pressure on the big men and make sure that life was a little bit difficult for them. That's something that Carolina probably should get used to. I would not expect teams to allow Carolina to be as successful inside as they have been early on against some of these mid-major opponents. So you're going to see this. This was a great test for those guys. I think they passed with flying colors. And, I think in that second half, you really got a feel for what Carolina can be. Caleb Wilson, I think we've seen some of those learning curves in terms of having to seal off defenders. That's something that he's got to be able to do because, that's where we saw a decent amount of the turnovers come in that first half, where some of those entry passes inside, it seemed like as the game went along, I mean, you look, Veesaar, 3 turnovers in the first half. Caleb Wilson, 2 turnovers in the first half. It felt like as the game went along, those turnovers started to dissipate. And so that's just a good job by those guys inside of doing what they needed to do.
When looking at the physicality and the way Carolina handled it, I think it's twofold. One, Frank Mitchell is a tank. This is a guy that, for as big and as wide body as he was and is, he lost 60 pounds in the offseason. So you're talking about a guy that last year weighed north of 320 pounds, closer to 330 pounds. And I do think his frame at times, and with how nimble he was on his feet, I do think it caused problems for Carolina at different points in the game. And that's probably one of the maybe the biggest negative is, for as big as Veesaar is, he's not thick. He's not tiny, but those types of guys are going to be able to give them trouble. And I thought, St. Bonaventure they were just active and their hands were all over the place. And I thought they did a lot of reaching, and I thought it was kind of funny how they never thought they committed fouls when you looked at some of the ways that Caleb Wilson's body ended up, contorted on the ground after taking multiple bumps to the basket. But, one thing we haven't really talked about with this front court is, how do we think they'll hold up against a real physical group? Because Kansas was not it. Kansas is not it. You'll get that on Thursday. You're going to, Jackson Kohler is one of the best big men in the country, and he's a throwback big. And this is Michigan State. This is Tom Izzo. This is Sparty. There's never been a Michigan State team that I've watched been coached by Izzo, and they weren't physical, and they weren't physical inside out. So I thought tonight was a step in the right direction for Carolina in that area, because they've got to get used to how to handle getting bodied and getting beaten and banged into, and they're going to get the ball and try to go right at them. And I thought for the most part they held their own. No real foul trouble for Caleb Wilson. And I thought Henri Veesaar, there was a few times he got beat a little easier than I would have liked, but I thought he did a really good job over the course of the minutes that he got on the floor with holding his ground and really anchoring the back line of Carolina's defense. Stat of the game, I went free throw shooting because Carolina was 21 of 27 from the foul line. That's just huge because they shot a pretty healthy percentage from the charity stripe after some struggles we've seen at different times this year. But on the flip side, St. Bonaventure, just 5 of 8. And what that tells me is Carolina did a really good job attacking the hole and just putting relentless pressure on the rim to where, all it felt like St. Bonaventure could do was foul to keep them, to kind of keep themselves alive. But how about Carolina being able to play, 40 minutes and defend at the level that they defended and do so without fouling? That's a sign of maturity. That's a sign of a team that's learning each other and they're growing together. A few weeks ago, who knows how many fouls Carolina have committed? because maybe they weren't prepared how to handle Mitchell or some of the other guys that BYU threw out of them. But that was not BYU, that St. Bonaventure threw at them. But that was not the case. Carolina defended. They defended at a high level, and most times when you've got 13 more makes than the opponent has attempts, and you've got 19 more attempts overall than your opponent does from the foul line, it's going to suggest that you're going to have a winning box score. That's what Carolina certainly had with themselves tonight.
Yeah, the most impressive thing I think out of this is not the way that Carolina attacked the basket, was able to get to the free throw line. We've seen that so far this year. I think the bigger thing is that you were so good at defending without fouling in this game. You're going up against a physical team. You thought that, yeah, there were going to be times where they would be able to draw some fouls on you. That didn't really happen. As physical as St. Bonaventure played, I mean, Carolina played just as physical as they did and found a way to not foul. You saw guys going straight up to contest shots. I mean, how many times was Carolina able to alter shots throughout this game because they were just going straight up instead of, putting their arms down and potentially fouling? You saw, some moments where Carolina, the only moment that I can remember that I was really overly frustrated with a foul was the one reach in by Kyan Evans. Everything else made a ton of sense where Carolina was fouling, what they were doing, but they played so smart tonight on that end of the floor. And that's the thing. Are they in terms of defense, I mean, are they Houston? No, they're probably not going to be as good as Houston's going to be, but their effort on the defensive end of the floor is relentless. And that showed in that area tonight, just how good of a job you did of keeping them off of the foul line. So credit to these guys. They are a group that knows how to do the one thing that at times last year, Carolina wasn't able to do. They've really had an issue with defending without fouling a year ago. You don't see that with this year's team. They know how to do that at a pretty consistent level, and you saw that yet again tonight.
All right, let's get into our main thoughts and takeaways from Carolina's 85-70 win over St. Bonaventure, which improves Carolina's record to 6-0. And this is the first 6-0 start since the 2017 season, which culminated in a national championship. Henri Veesaar entered tonight averaging nearly 15 and 8. Those numbers go up because he had 24 points tonight, 13 rebounds, career highs in both. It's his third double-double of his career. All three double-doubles have come at UNC. And tonight he was the best player on the floor, where the majority of the games it has been Kyan Evans, or it's been Caleb Wilson, and maybe Luka Bogovac falling in there number 2 in line. Tonight there was no doubt who the best player was. And, we read the quote from Hubert for the quote of the game, and he talked about how we were dunking everything. That started and ended with Veesaar. Like, it just got to the point in the second half where it didn't matter where he was, where he got the basketball. He was keeping the ball up. He was positioning himself to where he could just dunk it. And it felt like it was dunk after dunk. And if he wasn't dunking, he was getting fouled and going to the stripe. We're going to learn a lot about him on Thursday. That'll be another big-time matchup against a big. I think Kohler is better than Flory Badunga of Kansas, though. So this is going to be a legitimate battle of the bigs when those two teams meet on Turkey Day. But, we're doing the comparison thing. We're trying to find out, who these guys remind us of, who can best compare him to. And with the way he played tonight, especially when he mixed in a couple of those turnaround hook shots, or really just, turnaround push shots that he hit. I mean, it's different, but it was throwback Tyler Zeller vibes. Doesn't run the floor quite as well as Big Z, but does a lot of other things very similar to him, and was really happy for him, proud of him. This was a guy that was pretty down on himself and down on the team after the way they finished the Navy game. And there was a point in time where Carolina, forced a St. Bonaventure timeout. And who's the guy that was showing emotion going to the bench for the break? It was Henri Veesaar. And so Caleb Wilson is his front court mate. It feels like every time out he's had a career day for Carolina. It took Henri Veesaar to Game 6 as a Tar Heel, but he turns in his best performance, and it's a big reason why Carolina is sitting here at 6-0.
Yeah, I mean, he was tremendous tonight. And in terms of the old school Zeller vibes, I think it's really his touch around the rim. I think that really is what ultimately puts it over the top and what makes you sort of get that feeling. But tell you, man, I do not think I have seen we saw moments from Zeller where he was as aggressive as a dunker as we saw from Henri Veesaar, man. Like, he is tremendous. I definitely think that the hope is that with Veesaar, he just continues to get better. But we'll have to see. I think what he did tonight, and I put this in my thoughts, my initial thoughts after the game. I think this sort of takes away all doubt that anybody had in him, right? Like in terms of the physicality and how he would ultimately handle that, I think this sort of took away those concerns. And now you look at it and we say, okay, I think he's going to be perfectly fine going up against some of these more physical bigs. Well, it'll be interesting to see how he covers Kohler. Kohler is a guy that, can be physical with you. But the other thing about Kohler that's really interesting, if you look at his career path, is he's a guy that, really didn't take a lot of threes last year. But this year, it's taking over 3 per game. So that's an area of his game that you have to be well aware of if you're a defender against him. So we'll see what Veesaar is able to do on the perimeter too. But I love everything that I've seen from him. Defensively tonight, I thought LaFonso Ellis talked about it a lot, and he brought up some great points. The way he was able to alter shots, he might not necessarily finish with a ton of blocks, but it's what he's able to do with his just positional size that I think really bothers guards that get inside or even some of the big men. I mean, you look at it, in this game, Veesaar wasn't even credited with a block, but it's just that there are so many things, so many possessions that you leave feeling like Veesaar did something big on the defensive end of the floor. He really altered what was going on. So I think, that end of the floor, he looked really good. And then offensively, this is a guy that just knows where he needs to be at just about every time. Anytime that he gets a touch, it feels like he's in an advantageous position to be able to score. And you saw that again tonight. He has that touch around the rim that is so great. And I love the way that he fights on the glass, man. Defensively, especially early in the game, defensive rebounding, he was great. That was the one area, he was the one guy you could trust. Caleb Wilson had moments in this game where he rebounded really well, but really it was Henri Veesaar in that first half that was pulling down every rebound that Carolina needed to be able to at least keep themselves ahead of the Bonnies when they were making some of their runs. And of course, when you went into half, with it being a 2-point game, he was the reason that you were in that position. But that second half, man, that's the offensive type of performance that you want to see from him. It's the reason why I think he's probably going to be this team's second leading scorer. And it's the reason why Carolina went out and got him. If you watch the game yesterday, you saw some of the limitations that you have with a guy like Vin Allen Lubin at NC State and why he is a guy that is a solid player, but I don't think he's on the same level as what you're going to get from Henri Veesaar. So what a tremendous performance from him tonight. That's hopefully what we're going to see from him against some of the better bigs that he's going to play against this year, some of the more physical guys that he's going to play against this year. And if that's going to be the case, then Carolina is going to be perfectly fine. And there's absolutely nothing to worry about with Henri Veesaar.
You mentioned his ability to control the glass and be a rebounding presence, rebounding force for Carolina. I want to jump to that takeaway I had. Carolina +9 on the glass. They were 40-31. They entered the game 7th in the country in rebounds per game. And you're probably wondering, why are we talking about Carolina out-rebounding an A-10 school? St. Bonaventure entered sixth in the country in grabbing their second their offensive rebounds. This was a school that prides itself on getting to the offensive glass and really doing some damage that way. And tonight they were not able to do so because you had guys like Veesaar and Caleb Wilson. I mean, they combined for 25 rebounds. St. Bonaventure as a team had 31. Like these two dudes alone just, controlled the glass in ways that we simply haven't seen since John Henson and Tyler Zeller shared the front court. And I think I give Carolina a lot of credit. Like, we know how much they value getting to the offensive glass. And that's still, I think, a work in progress. I think it'll go to another dimension when they get their best leaper back, and that's Seth Trimble, because he can just come in from about every different angle and grab offensive rebounds and either, recreate a shot for himself or give it up for someone else. But these two guys were just absolutely Wilson and Veesaar were absolutely tremendous on the glass, and their ability to control the glass is the biggest key to the game. Is the biggest key, I think, for where Carolina is right now, with where they are trying to still work through things on the offensive end of the floor. I mean, for a school that came in averaging grabbing 44% of their misses, like if St. Bonaventure comes in and does that, this is a different game. Carolina still maybe finds a way to win, but the game's a lot closer. They only grabbed 10 of their 41 misses tonight, and they got to give Carolina a lot of credit for limiting the amount of offensive rebounds and being able to control the glass with their two bigs, and while some other guys are still pitching in, around the roster.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, I thought defensive rebounding for this group was really strong for most of the night. You saw Henri Veesaar, who was really good in the first half at that. I thought second half was really where you started getting Caleb Wilson on the defensive glass. I mean, the numbers weigh out to that. I mean, first half, Henri Veesaar, 17, excuse me. Woof, that would be a huge number. 7 defensive rebounds. Caleb Wilson had 4, but it was really both of those guys at moments going up and snatching down these rebounds. But in the second half, it was all Caleb Wilson. When Carolina needed to pull away, when there were misses on that end of the floor, Caleb Wilson came sailing in and pulled down those defensive rebounds, got Carolina out in the fast break, and led to some easy buckets for Carolina. That's what you want to see from this group, man. And I think we were hesitant to really be pounding our chest in the offseason about how big this roster was going to be. And, Henri Veesaar and Caleb Wilson at the 4 and 5 spots, are really going to take over. I think part of that was, we were concerned about what we had seen in previous years, especially last year. So you were a little bit hesitant to really get overly excited and think, oh, we're back to playing with 2 bigs at a really successful level. You were thinking, hey, if we can just get one of these guys to play at that level, similar to what we got with Armando, then we're going to be perfectly fine. They're showing you that they are the modern version of what we used to see from Roy Williams-led teams. Like, Roy Williams would love this team. The way that they rebound on the glass. I mean, +9 in this game is not nothing. As you said, this was a group that came in rebounding 44% of their misses. That is amazing. And again, part of that is probably because of the competition that they played. But still, that is a ridiculous number. Carolina, with as good of a rebounding group as they are, I don't even think their numbers are that good on the offensive end. I think they're solid so far this year, but they're not that good. So, I mean, that really shows you how good St. Bonaventure had it coming in. Their guys, there were some moments where they pulled down some offensive rebounds, but for the most part, Carolina did a really good job of limiting that. So, yeah, credit to these guys on the defensive glass. They're showing you that is one area that they are going to take care of. The offensive glass, yeah, maybe you could want a little bit more there as the season goes along, especially in some of these important games. But the good news is that on the offensive glass, what Carolina's doing is they're really doing a good job of finishing their second chance opportunities. And so credit to them in that area.
You look at the trio of Stevenson, Wilson, and Veesaar. 30 of the 40 rebounds came from those three because Jaron Stevenson pitched in with a quiet, 9.5 rebound performance in 31 minutes. If those three guys, for as long as this is the starting lineup, are going to average 27 plus rebounds per game as a trio, Carolina's going to be really tough to beat because you're getting legitimate rebounding three through five, and we know when you get Trimble back, he's as good a rebounding guard we've had since Kenny Williams. And I think it'll take Carolina, which I mentioned, enter tonight, number 7 in rebounds per game, to another level in that area of basketball. Did want to talk about Caleb Wilson. I just wrote down Caleb Wilson overcomes freshman moments. You look at the box score is going to show you a 20-point, 12 rebound double-double in 32 minutes, including going 10 of 10 from the foul line. Wasn't smooth sailing, though, just 5 of 13 from the field. I thought there were times he forced the action while being double-teamed and being triple-teamed. St. Bonaventure threw the kitchen sink at him, and they threw a lot at him that I thought he was able to adjust in the second half. I think for the second straight game, he struggled to kind of box out his defender when calling for the ball, and that led to some easy turnovers. But all in all, he still overcame that to have a pretty big performance. He entered the game averaging 20.6 points per game. He scores 20 points. He came in averaging less than the 12 rebounds per game, but he goes out there and has a 12 rebound performance. And because he's so long and physical and gifted, once he realized that his shot wasn't falling, well, I'll just get to the foul line and I'll just go make all my free throws. Another step in the right direction for him. I thought he got better as the game moved along, feeling out the double team and knowing when to pass, when to dribble, so on and so forth. The first 25, 30 minutes, I thought he was still learning and still adjusting. I thought the last 10 minutes or so he was really, really good. And this just speaks volumes about who he is as a player, where we're sitting here talking about him overcoming freshman moments in a game where he still has 20 and 12 and 32 minutes and was the second best player on the floor for either team.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that at some point he was going to be shown these double teams, and there were going to be moments where he was going to have to learn how to adjust. And I think that it's good that it comes in these games. This is the thing that I don't think people realize, is that this group is still relatively new with each other. So from that perspective, you're talking about there are still going to be some growing pains. I know that's hard to hear. I know everybody wants things to be perfect for these guys, and they want Caleb Wilson to be perfect. They don't want him to have any moments where you look on back at a half and say, man, that wasn't a great half from Caleb Wilson. Not saying that the first half was terrible from him. I mean, he still, got off to a really strong start, finished the first half with 9 points and was leading the team in scoring, but he was 2 of 7 from the field. And you saw that the double team was really bothering him at times. Really, I mean, as you mentioned, was taking some ill-advised shots because of the double. Basically play hero ball at certain points for Carolina. And that's when, Carolina, I don't remember if it was a media timeout or they ended up calling a timeout, and he gets set down for a minute, comes back into the game. And really from that point forward, everything sort of settled down for him. And I thought in that second half, he looked really good. And that's the thing, is that we've seen this before from him, where he hasn't necessarily had a great first half. Go back to Radford. Radford was a game where he got off to a tough start because he got into foul trouble in that game. Well, he adjusted the rest of that game and really closed that game out strong. Did the same thing in this one. Is he the leading scorer for the team? No. Is he the leading rebounder for the team in this game? No. But he still put together a really, really solid performance. And the other thing that was really great about him was in the second half, he found a way to get to the foul line. He was much more under control. I mean, in the first half, actually evens out. It was 5 5 of 5 in the first half, 5 of 5 in the second half. But that's the real key right there, is that he was 10 of 10 from the foul line. This is a guy that's going to get to the foul line early and often in games no matter who you're playing, because of just how athletic he is, just how quick he moves. There's not really going to be a lot of people that are going to be able to stay in front of him. And so it's going to lead to fouls. They're going to have to put him on the line. If he's going to be able to knock down, not saying 100% of his shots like he did tonight, but if he's going to go there and be able to hit about 80% of his free throws, we're talking about a dude that's going to put up some amazing numbers this year. So what a performance from him in that second half. Great way to bounce back, adjust to what was going on, and a great performance at the foul line from him as well.
Yeah, and he was one of many. Carolina, was 21 of 27, 78%. That's kind of where they need to be in every game moving forward. The last thing we'll talk about before we get to our discussion topic, hand out some game balls and to get out of here because we're running late here on a Tuesday night. Were the turnovers. 11 more of them in the first half. And not that St. Bonaventure was able to turn those points or those turnovers into points, just bogged down Carolina's offense. So they only scored 35. I would really love to know where Carolina's offense would be if they were averaging 8 turnovers a game. I'd really like to know if we were cutting these turnovers in half, just where Carolina's offense was at, because they still shot the ball well, but you gave away empty possessions because you just simply gave the ball away. There's something to be said about being able to go in the locker room and correct it. And that's something that I like about this group. Something I like about this team is that it feels like they can go into a locker room and be challenged, and they come out and respond because they only had 2 turnovers in the second half. We all know what they did, a few weeks ago against Kansas with all the turnovers in the first half, and then practically none in the second half. What did you make of the first half turnovers showing up once again, but Carolina's ability to once again respond to said first half turnovers?
Yeah, man, it's just become a trend. It's something that we can't ignore at this point. I hate it. I really do. But it's like I said in my initial thoughts. I think I'm concerned, but I'm not panicked. I'm not at the point where I think, man, this is something that isn't correctable for Carolina. This is just something that we have to deal with. But at the same time, I'm looking at this and I'm saying, why does this trend keep happening over and over again? Why are we sitting at this point in the season and every single game that we play, it feels like Carolina comes out and the first half is filled with turnovers? I mean, is there a game that we've seen so far this year where it hasn't felt like turnovers have been important for Carolina? I mean, you look at Navy, they didn't really turn the ball over a ton, but Navy didn't turn the ball over at all. And so that was part of the reason why Navy was still around in that game, was because they were doing an even better job than Carolina at holding the ball. You just wish that if Carolina was turning the ball over at the rate they're turning it over, could you force a similar amount of turnovers on the other end of the floor just to kind of even it out? That's the thing that's been crazy, is that first half disparity has been so big between them and the opponents that it allows an opponent like St. Bonaventure to sort of hold themselves in the game. That was the reason that St. Bonaventure was in the game. It wasn't because of anything else. I mean, it wasn't because they were doing an unbelievable job of offensive rebounding. It really wasn't because they were shooting the lights out in that first half. It was literally the main reason why they were in the game was because Carolina was turning it over so often, and they only had 4 turnovers. So that's something that Carolina's got to get figured out. They've got to get that corrected here, because the thing is that in a game like this, it doesn't hurt you. But let's say you come out and you do that against Michigan State. Michigan State showed you in the game against Kentucky that if you give them an early significant lead, it's going to be hard to claw back into the game against them, because they are just such a good basketball team. So Carolina's got to be careful in that area. I think it's certainly something that's on our radar now. We're 6 games into the season. It's something that's happened in just about every game. So it's something that you need to make sure you are focused on here for a big game like Michigan State. But I'm not going to say I'm panicked yet, because the way that they've responded in the second half and the way they take care of the basketball in the half that matters the most has you, sitting in a position where you're 6-0 for the first time since the last time you won a national championship.
Definitely was the source, I think, of the frustration for Hubert Davis in the first half. Probably because with a week off, and we were in that press conference last week after Navy. He talked about we get to work on us and we don't got to prepare for an opponent. I bet you the thing they were working on the most were the turnovers, because this is a trend. This is who Carolina is. They're going to turn it over in the first half. They're going to get yelled out in the second half or at halftime and not turn it over in the second half. And for the most part, you can navigate that and you can feast on that. And this one, you were able to do so and get a win over St. Bonaventure. But what happens when you don't? I think that's going to be the message. That's going to be probably the sense of urgency that we're hearing right now, or that they're still dealing with when they come out to start these games, because they're just not ready to go. They're lackadaisical turnovers. They're turnovers that can be corrected, but until they get corrected, this is just a part of who they are. And I think when you looked at Hubert Davis tonight, they were up 24-13, 12 minutes to go in the first half. And then all of a sudden, we get the typical Zayden High moving screen, a couple of turnovers, and St. Bonaventure is off and rolling to the point where Hubert Davis called a timeout because they'd gotten back into the game and tied it, mainly because they turned Carolina over and ran down the other way for points. So they're able to overcome it. But, at some point, this cannot continue to happen the way that it's happening. I've always said I don't mind turning it over 10, 12, 13 times if we're playing a requisite amount of possessions. And I think this team's playing a higher number. There's no excuse, though, for virtually every game you to turn it over double-digit times in the first half and then come out in the second half and play nearly a flawless game. That's got to get corrected if they really want to emerge, I think, as legitimate threats to win the ACC, let alone get to the Final Four. The discussion topic is one that I'm pretty much taking from you, the audience. Those of you that are listening, whether you're on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter, or maybe you're an audio listener, but a lot of people, some fans, and even some media members that were covering the game, I'm not going to say critical. I'll just say questioned the rotation and some of the substitution patterns of Hubert Davis. I want to remind those folks it was the 6th game of the year. You're without a starter. Like, this isn't exactly how it's going to look every game moving forward. There was one lineup to me that stood out that I think moving forward you cannot play for an extended period of time. But what did you make of the way Hubert Davis utilized the bench tonight and a bunch of different lineups? Of all the guys that came off the bench, Jonathan Powell led the team in minutes with 18. But he only scored 1 point and took 1 field goal. Second on the team was Derek Dixon, who scored 5 points. And then you've got Zayden High played 8 minutes, and a bunch of other guys played like a minute or two. What did you make of Hubert's rotation? Because I got some tweets, I got some DMs of people not too happy with the way he handled his bench tonight.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think in the first half, maybe there was a stretch where he left Derek Dixon in a little bit too long, left Jonathan Powell in a little bit too long, because they just weren't effective. And the numbers were telling you that they weren't effective. But he goes back to these guys in the second half, and all of a sudden, these guys are effective. That's ultimately the difference. And so I applaud him for going back to these guys, for trusting that certain rotations are going to work. But I think this bench is limited, man. I think that's just something that you got to admit right now. And when Seth Trimble comes back, somebody's going to have to go to the bench, and the bench all of a sudden will have someone that will be able to contribute at a pretty high rate. But right now, you just don't necessarily have that. And that's fine. Derek Dixon is a guy. This actually just got corrected. I saw this on social media from about an hour ago. This, according to Shelby Swanson of the News and Observer. She said that according to Steve Kirshner, Derek Dixon finished the game with 7 points, not 5. Caleb Wilson finished the game with 18 points, not 20, but still, that it's a relatively good game for Caleb. The point I'm making there is when you look at the bench production, that helps out a little bit with Derek Dixon. So, I mean, look, I think we've seen some moments from him that we really like, but he's a freshman, man. There's going to be moments where he makes mistakes. There's going to be turnovers. But, I mean, in this game, he did a really good job, I thought, of hanging on to the basketball. I just thought defensively there were moments where they were taking advantage of him, and that's okay. Jonathan Powell, I think, there were some moments where he was being taken advantage of on the defensive end of the floor. That's a little bit more frustrating because we look at his numbers last year at West Virginia. That was something that you were hoping he was going to be able to bring with him, as well as the three-point shooting. Didn't get that from him either tonight. So, that hurts a little bit more, but I mean, still, second half, he comes in, he's a +5. So he did what he needed to do when he was on the floor for Carolina to be effective. So I think, this bench is limited. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, guys, what are you expecting Hubert to do? I mean, some of these people, I really believe they want to go with an iron 5 like we had when we made the run in 2022. That just isn't realistic. You're not going to be able to do that. You've got to play these guys. And yes, I get it, man. St. Bonaventure is a team that maybe scared you a little bit in that first half with how close the game was. And you thought to yourself, man, we shouldn't be messing around like this. We need to make sure that we run the right lineups out there. In the second half, Carolina put a little bit of space between them, and they were able to utilize the bench. This is where you've got to learn to utilize these guys, because you have to figure out, ultimately, when you get into a game like Thursday's game, who are the guys that you can trust. And I think tonight was one of those examples of them going through the guys that are on that bench, figuring out who they can trust. And now we'll see whatever, 7, 8 guys. I think it'll probably be 8 at the max that they'll roll out against Michigan State. And this game will be one of the reasons that you can be confident that Carolina will be able to succeed with that bench group when they roll out there on Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, if there's one thing I took away, and I said it to you, and I think I saw, I think his name was Trevor Marks do the same thing or say the same thing. I don't know if you can play Derek Dixon and Jonathan Powell off the bench together. Yeah. And I think that's where the Trimble injury is really hurting Carolina. I think he wants to play Jonathan Powell at the 3, a smaller lineup, but that can spread the floor, create some spacing for some driving lanes and some kick out to some threes for JP. That would be the corner 3. He let them play extended minutes in the first half. It didn't go very well. I don't know if you can play those 2 guys moving forward in a close game. You're going to probably have to juggle them. But it's still, guys, it's game 6. We're still experimenting, man. We're still trying to figure out who can do what, who do you trust to do what, and how consistent can they do their job on a night in, night out basis. Zayden High, he's a Tasmanian devil. When he touches the ball, you don't know what's going to happen. It's usually a turnover. It's usually something negative. But you've got to play him right now because you have no one else. James Brown is not someone that I think is ready yet to be that backup big man that they want him to be. And I, as much as I believe that's going to be Jaron Stevenson's role, I can't prove that. Like Jaron Stevenson, how are you going to take him out of the starting lineup? So you need to get Zayden High as acclimated as you can because, you play a top 15 program on Thursday. You go to Rupp Arena next week. You've got big games coming up, and you're going to need them to be able to get in there and hold their own. So the injury doesn't help because I think it has some guys kind of playing out of position. But until Carolina's full, you're not really going to have a really good feel for what this rotation is going to look like because I think you're going to get an overhauled starting 5 with a different looking secondary unit or a backup unit that'll evolve as the season does move along. All in all, most of those guys that came in off the bench, they were able to contribute in some form or fashion really outside of Jaden Young, who has really done nothing since he transferred into the program. Want to hand out our game balls really quick, and then we'll give our closing note, and we'll get out of this edition of the podcast. I'll take the layup tonight. I'll get the easy one out of the way. I'll take Henri Veesaar and his 24 points, 13 rebounds in 35 minutes. He was 9 of 14 from the field, 1 of 3 from 3, and was 5 of 6 from the foul line. Just his best performance as a Tar Heel, his best performance of his collegiate career. He was the best player on the floor tonight. Was 1 of 3 from 3 as well, so showed the distance. It was just tremendous on both ends of the floor. Looked more like a vocal leader, showed some emotion. So it's the layup one tonight, but I'll take it. Give me Henri Veesaar for my game ball recipient.
Yeah, I mean, the other one I think is pretty easy as well, and that's Caleb Wilson. And I'll go with him. 20 points in this game, 5 of 13 from the field. So not the most efficient night that you're going to see from him, but from the foul line, I talked about it. He gets there 10 times. He makes 10 free throws. That's a great job by him. 12 rebounds in the game, 3 of them offensive, 9 on the defensive glass. 2 turnovers, both of those in the first half, settles it down in the second half, does a really good job. Also, early in the game, people probably may not have noticed, or if you did, you probably didn't notice it the entire way, but they did a really good job early in the game, I think, of throwing a different look at Daryl Simmons II by throwing Caleb on him, and I think he did an amazing job. His length really did a good job of bothering him. So he continues to be a force on both ends of the floor. And, I've seen it now. We're 6 games in, still waiting for that moment, Chris Spatola, where we're not going to get the best effort from Caleb Wilson, because I've seen it against some of these mid-majors. It seems like every time he's out there to play hard. And so another nice night for him. Also, do want to shout out Kyan Evans for his performance tonight. We didn't talk about him. But 11 points. I thought every 3 that he hit was pretty big. So, for people that want to criticize him and talk about how bad of a player he is and how he's not the right point guard for Carolina, just watch this game and you'll see how valuable he can be for Carolina.
Yeah, great point. Was much more efficient, was still aggressive ish from behind the 3-point line, which is where I think Carolina is most concerned with. I think they want his 3-point shooting. But whenever your point guard is giving you 11 points, and 3 assists, you'll be happy with that. You won't be happy with, the 4 turnovers and the 4 fouls, but, I thought it was good for him to see the ball go in the basket, and he had the highest plus minus of any Carolina player, including the starting 5 at plus minus 22. He looked a lot more comfortable, looked a lot more confident. Maybe the guy that benefited the most from the week off. Was just able to kind of take a deep breath, look at some film, reevaluate some things. He looked a lot more comfortable tonight, leading Carolina's half-court offense, their fast break offense, so on and so forth. Did have one closing note we wanted to get to you guys. It was a recruiting note. For Carolina, of course, as you know, they're heavily involved in recruiting Dylan Mingo. This is a pretty big target for Carolina in this 2026 class. And he made the Final Four of his recruitment. I'm trying to find the tweet right now, but he did. They are in the Final Four for his recruitment, along with Penn State. Which of course he has a family relative that goes there. I think is it Texas, the other one, and maybe it's Oregon that is also in play for him. This is really where Carolina's attention is at right now. Is trying to land him to complete what's going to be a really small 2026 class. So it's Washington, Penn State, Baylor, and then Carolina. Those are the 4 finalists for Dylan Mingo. So they got the work cut out with them with the Penn State situation, but they've gone all in. This was a guy that was supposed to visit. Flight situation had to make him cancel, but he was able to revisit, had a good chance, and a lot of intel shows Carolina is alive and well in his recruitment. And I think he's priority number one for Hubert Davis and his staff, and good to see them there being the Final Four running for a top recruit in next year's recruiting cycle. With that, folks, that's going to wrap up this edition of the podcast. Before we let you go, we encourage you to visit the website, HeelToughVlog.com. Full coverage of the Fort Myers tip-off event will be found with game previews and recaps. We got St. Bonaventure. That'll be taken care of in the morning from a recap perspective. Then we'll be back, getting you ready for the matchup with Michigan State on Thanksgiving afternoon. Anthony's doing a great job keeping you up to date with all things football. One more game to go in the regular season. They got to go to NC State next Saturday, but we're closing in on signing day. 2 more players committed to Carolina just tonight. And Anthony has you covered with all that news, notes, and information. So we want to get you to the website every single day. That's HeelToughVlog.com, the latest and best coverage of Carolina basketball and Tar Heel football. As for the podcast, you know where to find us. Just search the Four Corners Podcast and we'll pop up. There, we strongly encourage you guys to hit that subscribe button. That way you don't miss any editions of the show moving forward, including tomorrow's episode, which will preview Michigan State, or Thursday's episode. Yes, we will be recording on Thanksgiving night, where we will recap the game against the Big Ten Power. If you're a video consumer to the podcast, best way to keep up with us is to like the Facebook page, Heel Tough Blog, subscribe to the YouTube channel at Heel Tough Blog, or follow me right here on my Twitter handle, HTB_Josh. If you do any of those 3 things, you'll be notified when we go live, and you can jump in and be a part of the conversation talking Carolina basketball. But with that, folks, it is going to wrap up this edition of the show. I do want to thank Anthony once again for hosting with me. We want to thank you for watching and listening. And as always, go Tar Heels.